Hey, it's Carrie.
And Ashley.
We welcome you to the Self-Care Cafe. We are both health professionals and moms and nature lovers and food lovers and love helping women get over dieting and just start living. We think that talking about bodies and perfect bodies and dieting is just boring.
Did we put you to sleep there, Carrie?
Yes. So if you are ready to ditch dieting and get to living and talk about more important things, then you are in the right place. We don't put shame and guilt on the menu here. You don't even have to tip us.
Nope.
Come hang with us. The advice is free. We want to have a bunch of girlfriends to just hang out with and get real with, and it's time to start living, ladies.
Hey listeners, welcome back to another episode of our Self-Care Cafe podcast. Last week we talked about why you should smash your scale and we got going pretty good, and so we decided to divide it into two parts. So if you haven't listened to the first part, go back to episode number 7 and listen to the first part. And this episode today is just a continuation of our conversation, so we'll jump right into it.
We are not crazy about the scale for many reasons. It does not gauge your health status. It does not gauge, I always like to say it doesn't, gauge what kind of person you are. It doesn't gauge your happiness. All that scale does is tell your relationship to gravity.
Exactly.
How much gravitational pull do you have on your body, right? And so and what we tend to do is attach our self-worth or our mood for the day to that number. So if you're someone who gets up in the morning, and as we're talking about this, just kind of assess your relationship with the scale. Are you one of the ones that get up in the morning and what that number says, it's going to determine your mood for the rest of the day?
Right. Yeah,
And
because we often turn it into this like pass fail or all or nothing thinking once we get on there. Because if we have a number in mind where we want to be, let's just say, and we either aren't there or we're over it, then we've considered ourselves a failure for that day or the behaviors we did the day before or whatever. And then to take it a step further, well, one, we feel bad about that. Probably we have some guilt and shame going on. And then we probably are going to adjust our actions for this day, today. Whether that is I blew it, so I might as well just like not worry about it today, or maybe I'll restrict more today, or whatever the case or scenario might be. But we definitely turn it into this like pass fail. And if we passed for the day, if the number is where we want it to be or lower, then we can feel really great about ourselves and oh, that restriction we did yesterday must be working, so I'm going to do it more today so it can keep going lower. And at what point is low enough? Sometimes too, like that becomes this really tricky, sticky situation.
yeah, we tend to punish ourselves if we feel like we failed. Although you're punishing yourself either way, like you said, sometimes if we pass, it's like, oh, this restriction, the food restriction is really working. I'll tighten it up even more. Ultimately, you're punishing yourself. We can, Ashley and I have been doing this for so long. Sometimes we can tell people that are in our lives, we can tell when they're restricting food and they need to eat.
Yes.
When you restrict too much, you get anxious, you're on edge, low energy. There's so many signs, but that's what we tend to do to ourselves when that number isn't meeting our expectation.
Right.
And we talk about too, Ashley, about muscle versus fat, and what I'm sure most of you have probably heard by now, oh, muscle weighs more than fat. There's some truth to that, but it's the way that it's presented. So a pound is a pound. So if you
Right.
take a pound of muscle, it's and a pound of fat, they're both weigh a pound, right? But really, in this case, it's about volume.
Right. It's kind of like you just made me think of this example that might help people like visualize it. If you take a pound of feathers
Mhm.
versus a pound of bricks, you're going to
Yes.
need way more feathers than bricks to
Yes.
equal 1 pound. Like if you put them on one of those scales that balance each other out, one's
Yeah.
going to be a lot taller or have more volume, like Carrie's talking about. And that's the same way with the muscle versus the fat piece.
Yeah, or one that I don't know why I've always used this one, but soap.
Yeah.
So you take a bar of soap, that's your muscle, versus soap suds,
Hmm.
that's your fat. Like you need a whole lot of of, soap suds to equal that 1 pound of to eat, to be both a pound. But so in your body, so what that means is muscle is denser than
Yes.
fat.
Yes.
So you can have more muscle, um, and and then you add if you have heavier bones, because if you are exercising and strength training, certain cardio activities that are weight bearing, it can also give you denser bones, or maybe you just, naturally genetic wise have denser bones. And on the scale, it's going to look heavier.
Right.
And but that's a good thing, and yet we don't think about that when we are staring that number down.
Right. We all have this sort of like idea that the lower the number, the better. And lots of different things like better
Mhm.
health, better self-worth or self-value, like we mentioned earlier, because quote unquote, you were good and you worked hard and you got down to this number, whatever it might be, which is so frustrating to think about because all that quote unquote hard work is just boring and miserable.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Like there's so many things in life that we can focus on. It's sad. We get it though. Like both been there.
Mhm.
And we are not saying in any way that you are a bad person for doing that. This is just how we've been conditioned to be.
Right. Exactly.
Our society, including our medical establishments,
Mhm.
right? That's just we are encouraged from day one
Yep.
to keep that weight down, weigh
Mhm.
yourself, um, depending on how you grew up. We were talking about this in our group yesterday about that trickle down effect through the generations,
Yep.
and how um, parents affect the kids, and then they grow up with those beliefs, and then they affect their kids.
Mhm.
Um, and it's sad. And I think that sometimes, Ashley, when we talk about this stuff, people get in their heads, they're like, oh, so I can eat whatever I want and I don't have to take care of my body. That is not what we're saying at all.
Right. Yeah. I think it's definitely that hard misconception because we're so all or nothing thought
Yes.
process. Like
Yeah.
it's super hard because we all want black and white answers. We want to know what to do and not to do, but there's so much gray area in health and nutrition, especially. And so, like, we're talking about this one side where we're like restricting and we're super reliant on the scale to gauge our quote unquote progress or accountability or whatever we might think of it as. And then there's the opposite of just doing whatever you want all the time. But what Carrie and I talk about is finding that middle ground where we don't have to be obsessive or restrictive of food, weight, calories, whatever it might be, but we also aren't just totally disregarding how our habits are making us feel either, like just eating whatever we want, doing whatever we want. There's pieces from both that we can include in like what we talk about with intuitive eating and paying attention to our body cues and all of that.
Yeah. Being nice to your body.
Yes. Taking
Um,
care of it.
yeah. Just like you would like your child or your best friend, the kind of relationship. Um, why do we have such a hard time extending that same kindness to ourselves and our own bodies? I
Yeah.
mean, when you stop and think, what has your body been through your life? So think about, the injuries you've gotten, the illnesses you've gotten, if you've given birth or had any pregnancy losses or whatever it is.
Mm.
Think of everything your body has been through. And here you still are, right? Like, really, it's amazing if we could stop for a second and just think, wow, and start really appreciating the body that we have, and how much it does for us, instead of what we tend to do is we reduce it to one number.
Right. And one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately, goodness,
A lot, like,
is like we're programmed to not like our body. That's just how it is. Our culture has programmed us to not like our body, no matter what it looks like,
yes, yep.
no matter what size we are, no matter what shape we are. We're all programmed to not like our body. And so we can undo that programming. It
Yes.
takes some work because, like Carrie said, we're so conditioned and it's so ingrained in us, but we can unlearn that. We can get out of that. And that's what Carrie's talking about is instead of hating your body or instead of punishing your body for what it looks like, we can choose to show it some kindness. Doesn't mean we have to like it or love it, but we can choose to take care of it and show our body some kindness. And kindness includes nourishing our body with food, with things that make us happy, with social connections, with doing things that we enjoy. And nourishment can go a really long way to help with our health.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And also to start thinking about, like, like we've talked about diets and why, paying attention to what nourishes your own body instead
Right.
of what someone else is telling you should nourish it, right? What Then that nourishment goes to other things, how, whether it's physical activity, getting enough rest, um taking care of things that are causing stress in your life and stress to your body. And honestly, dieting does that. When you restrict too much, your body's like, what's going on? Like, you're not even giving us enough calories to function normally, right? And then that causes more stress in your body. Um, a lot of times with dieting is stressful, restricting calories too much is stressful. Stress causes cortisol and these stress hormones in your body, which ironically encourages belly fat. Right? Like,
Right.
it's almost like we think we're tricking our bodies and we're really not.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this in one of the meal plan episodes, but when we're dieting or we're focusing on that intentional weight loss, we're really setting ourselves back each time because what we can do the best with is like all the things Carrie just said, paying attention to our bodies. And I was just talking to a client about this the other day, is basically our health is kind of like an experiment. We have to figure out what works for us and our bodies. Um, like what works for our schedule, what works for our budget, what works for our body, what works for our family if we're, in a family unit trying to take care of other people's needs at the same time. And so basically it's all a big experiment and figuring out what works for you. And all these diet plans or programs or intentional weight loss pursuits are usually one size fits all, and that is not going to be helpful for you. And so every time we embark on something like that, we're getting more out of touch with what our body's telling us. We're not trusting it anymore. We're not listening to it anymore. We're getting rid of those signals and those pathways. And so it takes longer sometimes. The more that we've dieted or the more that we've, tried to lose weight, the farther we are away from our own body.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time we go on another diet or we punish ourselves at the gym because we think we ate too much, or, we've got to burn this off. And um, it's a constant cycle of punishment.
Yeah.
We're going to punish ourselves by not eating, and we're going to restrict, and then we're going to punish ourselves at the gym by overtraining or over exercising and doing a brutal workout. but then you do that, and then you're not eating enough nutrients for your body to heal from that brutal workout.
Exactly.
Right? It's we get into these horrible punishing cycles that we do to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's so much freedom. I know you agree, Ashley, with not having that scale, that pressure
Right.
to get to know your body again, maybe for the first time. I mean, I believe that we're kind of born that way to
Mhm.
know. Babies know when they're hungry, they know when there's something wrong, they tell us by crying. Um, and even if they can't verbalize it yet, they know, they feel they feel their bodies, they feel the signals that their body's giving them. And then somewhere along the way, we're conditioned to um, fall into these molds and it's not like, and we're not playing a blame game here either. Like, we're not blaming parents. It's just what our society is conditioned toward.
Right.
And we would love for more of you to find that freedom in, yeah, you're the one living in your body.
Right.
And I always ask people, at the end of your life, when you look back, what will you regret? And it's easy to say, oh, I don't regret anything because it made me who I am today. But I feel like we all will have some regrets. And will you regret um, the amount of time you spent worrying about that bulge, that imperfection on your body, that wrinkle, the sag, um, the extra, the quote unquote extra 10 pounds that you spent your lifetime trying to lose?
Right.
um, will we regret all that time and energy and just all of it that we put toward that?
For sure. And I I want to mention something about imperfection. You said that word.
Mm,
Who decided that it was an imperfection in the first place?
exactly.
Most of the time, they're made up. So some company can sell you something to quote unquote fix it, but obviously it doesn't work. So you have to keep buying it.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. And I want to talk about this before we jump off too. What about, Carrie, people who are using the scale for that accountability factor, not necessarily maybe like actively dieting or something like that? But I hear a lot of people and clients talking about, well, I just use the scale for the accountability.
Mm, yeah, that's sometimes I'll be honest, don't really know what to say. It's frustrating because, again, it takes away from you. You're using an external cue to tell you
Exactly. Oh, that is
it.
such a great point.
Yeah, like that we instead of using those external cues, so your weight, what are some other ones,
How
like
your clothes fit.
clothes are fitting.
The,
um,
like, the portions of your food maybe even, like, if normally you eat this X portion, but today you feel like a Y portion, but you won't allow yourself to have it.
Mhm. Yeah. It's you lose touch. And again, a lot of us have already lost touch. So it's regaining that, getting back in touch with your body and your body signals, and you knowing what is best for your body, instead of something else like that. That is an arbitrary number. I guess that's, if we want to get anything across, like that is just an arbitrary number that is not assigned to you. It is
Right.
not assigned to you. Your medical provider might want to make you think it is. Social media might want to make you think that it is, but it's not. That is not you. That number is not you.
Right.
And
And
you're
Yeah, and the weight charts and the BMI charts, and there's charts called ideal body weight and things like that. They're all just math equations, and they actually don't predict health at all, even though, like Carrie said, other places might have you believe that. But the research really shows us that that's not accurate. So we can be healthy in different sizes. We just have to find that sweet spot for us where we are eating generally healthfully, nourishing our bodies enough, and also enjoying our food and not depriving or restricting. We're moving our bodies in ways that feel good to us, that make us feel better, maybe. We're dealing with our stress. We're having good social connections. And our body's going to kind of hang out at a weight where it feels comfortable. And do we need to know what that weight is? No.
No, because does it matter if you feel good, if you have plenty of energy, if you're sleeping well, if you feel happy, your moods are stabilized? If does that number on the scale matter?
Right, or if your labs look great at your doctor's office,
Right,
if all of
right.
those things look great, what does it matter? Like Carrie mentioned those quote unquote extra 10 pounds or even more than that sometimes. Like, what is the misery of trying to get that off
Mm,
versus all the benefits you're experiencing with the better moods, the better energy, better sleep, and all of that? It
right.
doesn't, the benefit doesn't outweigh the risk or whichever way, whichever way that should go.
Right, right. Yeah, like skinny does not equal healthy.
Right.
When I was anorexic, I was not healthy. Some people smoke to keep their weight down. Does that make does that make them healthier than
Right.
someone who weighs a little bit more and doesn't? We don't
And
know. Like, everyone is different, right?
right, and on
Uh,
the flip side too, like, not eating enough to keep your weight down, I feel like is such a normalized way to do it because a lot of people do it, and the whole idea of weighing less is healthier, but also we have this other sort of dialogue sometimes about the less calories you eat, the better, or hardworking or,
makes you a
whatever.
stronger person. You've
Yeah.
got that willpower. That means you have
Oh,
um this characteristic or part of your character that is better than someone who, likes to eat her chocolate every day or
which is
whatever it
me. I eat
is.
chocolate
Me,
every day.
me too.
Yeah, and not to mention on top of all of that, genetics play such a big role. So all of the social media influencers or everyone that thinks it's quote unquote so easy to stay trim and thin or whatever, that's because their bodies are built to be that way. They don't have to work that hard to do it. And so the whole idea of working harder to lose weight is a bunch of baloney for for lack of a for a more appropriate term.
Yeah, and when we talk about genetics, I know that sometimes I think that we want to be careful. Like, we don't want you to think, oh, you're just a victim to your genetics. So
Right.
why bother? Don't do, because I think that sometimes people fall into that too. That's not what we mean. What we mean is like, okay, for instance, I have skinny chicken legs. I just do. Now, some people would love to have my legs because they think theirs are too big. But there are times when I'm like, oh, I wish I had a little bit more meat on my legs, right? But my legs are genetic. Like I can only get them so big. I would have to spend all day at the gym, make it my life to
Mhm.
get really larger legs. And the opposite. So if you got a little bit larger legs, like I mentioned it before, that I think I can't remember if it was a Nike commercial or something, but this was a few years ago, and it was an athlete, and she was on there, and she said, I like my thighs because my grandmother had these thighs and my mom has these thighs and I have these thighs. These are whatever family thighs, these are the Smith thighs. And I loved that because what she was saying, her thighs were strong. She was, I think, a professional soccer player, maybe, or something like that. Um, but her thighs were also genetic. So that's what we mean. Like, we're not saying, oh, just give in to your genes, it's useless. Why bother? Don't try. That's not what we're saying when we're talking about genetics. your boob size, for instance, probably genetics, right?
Right.
Somewhere. So that's what we mean when we're talking about genetics.
Exactly. And like we talk about, you can do some things to help, like figure out what nutrition does work for you without like obsessing over it, and figuring out what movement you like to do to keep your body flexible and strong and all of that. But there is a point where it's like you have to, so I like to sometimes compare body size to foot size as far as genetics go. Like Carrie was just saying, our foot size is pretty much just going to be what it is, and you can't really change it unless you do something extreme like lop some toes off or something. And our weight is typically the same idea. Like you can't change it without doing something extreme, and when we do those extreme things, it's costing us other stuff, like our mental health, our emotional health. If we're weight cycling, which is that weight loss and weight gain cycle over and over, we're costing our physical health. Um, if we're
Yeah.
undernourishing, we're not healthy anyways.
Right. Right. Like your height, the way that we're built, like Ashley, you and I are built differently,
Yeah.
right? Like I am short-waisted, I have longer legs, a short waist, I have no waist really. I don't have like the little hourglass figure. Whoops, I have a small butt, and bigger boobs,
Mhm.
and that is just how I'm built. Like I can't change that. Um Versus, there was at the gym the other day, this little thing, but she was um stacked, like she works out hard, and she's very muscular. Well,
Right.
shorter limbs are put muscle on more easily than
Right.
longer
Right.
limbs.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say that, because remember, Carrie, we sat down on a couch next to each
Yes, yes.
and we're not that much far apart in height, right? Like and to be honest, everybody, Carrie and I don't see each other a lot in person. We do a lot of Zoom meetings and things. But anyways, so we sat down next to each other one day on a couch to do, like, just chat or whatever. And like I said, we're not that much different in height, but my torso was a lot longer than Carrie's.
Yes.
And so I was like looking down
I
on
had
her.
to sit on a pillow.
Oh, it was so
Yeah,
funny to just like
that's a
say, oh, our
great
bodies are just different. Like,
yeah, that's a great example. Yes. Like it's just, and we laughed about and it just, like, how much time do we spend? I always encourage clients of mine, do not post like on your refrigerator a picture of some celebrity that you, for quote unquote motivation, that you
right,
think you want to look like. That is not you. That's not your body. Supermodels, they have the genetics to be supermodels.
right.
They have the height, they have the build. That's, it's, we're so passionate about this. We
Yeah,
just want you all to give us
I
all this
know.
crap up.
And one last piece about it is, I was just thinking, even if, and let's say me and you, Carrie, right? Even if you and I both ate, like if we were in my research bubble, if we ate exactly the same foods in the same amounts at every meal, every snack for like weeks or whatever, and even if we did only the same amount of activity and exercise for a while in my research bubble, so nothing else is different, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We'd still be different. You can't eat the same things as other people, and you can't exercise the same way as them and expect to look like them.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm not gonna like grow shorter legs and a longer torso because I
right,
eat just like Ashley.
right.
Uh,
And
it's
probably one or both of us would be pretty miserable.
yes, yes. And like the other thing too is, when if you are really like strength training and things like that, and you want to add muscle, you have to eat enough calories to be able to gain that muscle.
Right.
It's it's when you're restricting so many calories, and you wonder why, um, like it's about body composition too. So you can lose a bunch of, when you lose weight, if you're not, um, if you are not, Ashley's showing me the time. Time's up, Carrie.
Yeah, we could chat about this stuff all day.
I
So go ahead and
know,
finish
I
your thought, Carrie.
If you're now, what was my thought? Oh, when you're losing weight fast, you also tend to lose a lot of muscle.
Right.
So you might not actually be losing that much fat. If you're
Right.
losing muscle, you might be losing bone mass. So it's all very interesting. There's so much to it. We just want you to get off the dang scale and just listen to us. Do what we say.
Oh, Carrie. We always have some points that we want to cover, but then we just kind of let it roll, and we always tend to think of extra things or go off on the tangents, like Carrie said. But I feel like we've talked about this probably in every episode. Everything sort of connects to each other and goes back and forth. You can't really escape this thing without talking about this thing or any of that. But there's a lot of great information, all the previous episodes too. So a lot of the things that we touch on here, we've touched on or went deeper into in some of the other episodes. So
Awesome.
yeah.
This is a great conversation.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and if you want to see us or find us elsewhere, we're on Instagram at Self-Care Cafe, all one word, _official. We're also on Facebook, Self-Care Cafe page there. We are on Patreon at Self-Care Cafe also. And then obviously, if you're listening to us right now, we're on Spotify and we have a little Buzzsprout podcast website too.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you tell Ashley's our brand manager?
Right. Somebody's got to do it.
Yes. Right. Not me. Well, thank you all so much for listening. We'd love to know if you have any questions or thoughts about this. Like Ashley said, she told you where you can find us.
Yeah, and don't forget to like rate and review us on the podcast platform so we know what you want more of or what you don't want.
Just, rate us only if you're going to give us a good one. I'm just kidding. With that said, we will see you next time, and we love you, latte.
Love you, latte.